Ever wonder why some folks up here seem to be echoing the talking points down south, especially when it comes to Mr. Trump? It's not just about shared borders or similar TV shows. There's something deeper brewing. We're talking about the potential for a real, tangible connection between the American right, spearheaded by Donald Trump, and emerging factions within the Canadian right. Now, before you picture Mounties sporting MAGA hats, let's be clear. This isn't about a wholesale takeover. It's more nuanced than that. It's about ideas, strategies, and a shared sense of, well, let's call it discontent, finding fertile ground on both sides of the 49th parallel. Think about it. Canada's always had a conservative bent, but it's traditionally been a different flavor than what you see in the States. More, shall we say, polite conservatism. But lately, there's been a noticeable shift. A louder, more populist voice is emerging, one that seems to resonate with some of the same sentiments that propelled Trump to power. Are these just coincidences? Are they organic movements bubbling up independently? Or is there something more, deliberate, at play? Are there active attempts to import, adapt, and implement Trump-era tactics and ideologies into the Canadian political landscape? It's a question worth asking, especially when you start seeing familiar arguments about immigration, resource development, and cultural identity popping up in our own backyard. This isn't your typical Canada versus America debate. It's not about hockey or healthcare. It's about the very fabric of our political discourse. It's about understanding how global trends, amplified by social media and increasingly polarized news cycles, are reshaping the conservative movement in Canada. It's about figuring out if there's a conscious effort to build bridges between the Canadian right and the Trump wing of the Republican Party, and if so, what that might mean for the future of Canadian politics. We're not just talking about policy differences here. We're talking about a fundamental shift in tone, strategy, and the very definition of what it means to be conservative in Canada. So, what's driving this potential alignment? Is it simply a case of like-minded individuals finding each other across borders? Or is there a more organized effort to cultivate these connections? Is it about shared grievances, perceived or real, against the current Liberal government? Or is it about something deeper, something that speaks to a broader sense of cultural unease and a desire for a return to perceived traditional values? These are the questions we'll be grappling with. We'll be looking at the key players, the common themes, and the potential consequences of this emerging alliance. We'll be digging into the rhetoric, the policies, and the personalities that are shaping this new landscape. And let's be real, this isn't just some academic exercise. This has real-world implications for all of us. It affects the debates we have, the policies that are implemented, and the kind of country we want to build. Whether you lean left, right, or somewhere in between, understanding the forces at play is crucial. Because if the Trump playbook is being adapted for Canadian consumption, we all need to know what's in it, how it's being used, and what the potential outcomes might be. This isn't about taking sides, it's about understanding the game. And, right now, the game is changing. Maintenant, penchons-nous sur le contexte historique de tout ça. On ne parle pas de quelque chose qui est sorti de nulle part. L'histoire du conservatisme au Canada est longue et sinueuse, et elle a toujours été influencée d'une manière ou d'une autre par ce qui se passe au sud de la frontière. Pensez à l'époque des loyalistes, fuyant la Révolution américaine, pour rester fidèles à la couronne. Ça a jeté les bases d'une certaine forme de conservatisme au Canada, un conservatisme axé sur la tradition, l'ordre et un certain respect pour les institutions. Ce n'était pas nécessairement le même genre de conservatisme qu'on voyait aux États-Unis, mais il y avait un lien indéniable. Au fil des ans, cette influence américaine a pris différentes formes. Durant la guerre froide, par exemple, le Canada a partagé avec les États-Unis une crainte commune du communisme, ce qui a renforcé certaines alliances et a influencé les politiques intérieures. Mais même à cette époque, il y avait des différences importantes. Le Canada a toujours eu un filet de sécurité sociale plus solide et une approche plus nuancée des questions sociales. Ce n'est que plus récemment, avec l'ascension des médias sociaux et des chaînes d'information en continu que cette influence est devenue plus directe et plus polarisante. On voit maintenant des arguments et des tactiques politiques qui étaient autrefois confinés aux États-Unis se répandre rapidement au Canada, souvent sans le contexte ni la nuance nécessaire. Faut aussi considérer l'évolution du Parti conservateur du Canada. Après des années de division et de lutte interne, le parti a fini par se réunir sous la bannière conservatrice, en fusionnant l'Alliance canadienne et le Parti progressiste conservateur. Ça a créé une coalition plus large, mais ça a aussi ouvert la porte à différentes factions et idéologies au sein du parti. On a vu l'émergence de conservateurs plus sociaux, de libertariens et de populistes, chacun avec sa propre vision du pays et de son avenir. Cette diversité interne a créé un terrain fertile pour l'influence de mouvements et d'idées venant de l'extérieur, y compris du mouvement conservateur américain. N'oublions pas non plus le rôle des groupes de réflexion et des organismes de défense des intérêts. Il y en a plusieurs au Canada qui sont financés par des donateurs américains ou qui entretiennent des liens étroits avec des organisations similaires aux États-Unis. Ces groupes contribuent à façonner le débat public et à influencer les politiques gouvernementales, souvent en promouvant des idées et des approches qui sont alignées sur le programme conservateur américain. C'est une autre façon dont l'influence américaine peut se faire sentir au Canada, même si elle n'est pas toujours visible ou évidente. Alors, comment tout ça se traduit-il dans la réalité? On le voit dans les débats sur l'immigration, par exemple, où certains politiciens et commentateurs canadiens reprennent des arguments et des tactiques qui ont été popularisés par des personnalités comme Donald Trump. On le voit aussi dans les discussions sur les changements climatiques, où certains groupes remettent en question la science et s'opposent aux mesures visant à réduire les émissions de gaz à effet de serre, souvent en utilisant des arguments qui sont similaires à ceux utilisés aux États-Unis. Et on le voit dans les débats sur les questions culturelles, où certains dénoncent ce qu'ils considèrent comme une guerre culturelle menée par les élites libérales, en utilisant un langage et des tactiques qui sont directement inspirés du mouvement conservateur américain. C'est un phénomène complexe et multiforme, mais il est important de le comprendre si on veut vraiment saisir les enjeux politiques auxquels le Canada est confronté aujourd'hui. So, reflecting on this journey so far, It's like watching the tide come in. You see the individual waves, the little ripples, but it's the overall surge that really changes the shoreline. We've been poking around at the individual pieces, the historical currents, the shifting sands of political discourse, and the subtle undercurrents of influence from south of the border. But it's the way these elements are starting to coalesce that truly warrants a bit of a chin-scratching, wouldn't you say? It's not about pointing fingers or assigning blame, mind you. It's more about understanding the recipe, recognizing the ingredients that are going into this, well, let's call it a political stew. You've got your traditional Canadian conservatism, seasoned with a healthy dose of prairie pragmatism, and then you start adding in some of these newer flavors, these bolder spices that seem to have been imported directly from the Trump-era playbook. The question, of course, is whether these flavors are complementing each other or clashing in a way that's ultimately going to leave a bad taste in everyone's mouth. Consider it akin to building a cabin in cottage country. You need solid foundations, the right kind of wood, and a design that works with the landscape. You can't just slap something together based on a blueprint from somewhere else and expect it to withstand the Canadian winter, can you? Similarly, you can't just transplant political ideas from one country to another and expect them to take root and flourish without adapting them to the local climate, the local culture, and the local way of doing things. The thing is, this isn't just about political theory or academic debates. This is about real people, real communities, and the real challenges that we face as a country. It's about how we talk to each other, how we solve problems, and what kind of future we want to build, for ourselves and for our kids. And that's why it's so important to understand the forces that are shaping our political landscape, even if those forces are subtle or indirect. As we pivot towards the final reflection, think of it like this. We've been tracing the tributaries of a river. We've seen where they come from, how they flow, and what kind of sediment they carry. But now it's time to step back and look at the bigger picture, to see how all these tributaries converge to form the main current, and where that current is ultimately taking us. It's a journey that requires a bit of careful navigation, a bit of open-mindedness, and a healthy dose of good old Canadian common sense. After all, we're all in the same boat, eh? So, where does all this leave us then, eh? Not with a definitive answer, mind you, but with a renewed sense of awareness, like finally seeing the forest for the trees. We've poked around the edges of this potential convergence between the Trump era, American right, and the evolving Canadian conservative landscape, and what's emerged isn't a clear-cut alliance but something far more subtle, more nuanced, and perhaps more concerning. It's a creeping influence, a sharing of tactics and ideologies that could subtly reshape the very fabric of our political discourse. The real takeaway here isn't about who's right or wrong, or about demonizing one side or the other. It's about recognizing the power of ideas, the way they can travel across borders, take root in unexpected places, and ultimately transform the way we see ourselves and the world around us. It's about understanding that even in a country as seemingly stable and grounded as Canada, we're not immune to the forces of polarization and division that are sweeping across the globe. Maybe it's time we started paying a little closer attention to the conversations happening around the kitchen table, at the coffee shop, and online. Are we hearing echoes of rhetoric from south of the border creeping into our own discussions? Are we seeing familiar arguments being repackaged and presented as uniquely Canadian solutions? Are we allowing ourselves to be drawn into increasingly polarized debates that leave little room for nuance or compromise? 'Cause at the end of the day, the strength of our democracy rests on our ability to engage in respectful dialogue, to listen to different perspectives, and to find common ground even when we disagree. It's about building bridges, not walls. It's about fostering a sense of community, not division. And it's about remembering that we're all in this together, eh? The true practice begins now, with each of us taking a more active role in shaping the conversations that define our country. It's about being informed, being engaged, and being willing to challenge our own assumptions and biases. It's about recognizing the power of our own voices and using them to promote a more inclusive, more tolerant, and more understanding Canada. Because, let's face it, the future of our country depends on it.